And why don't we kick off this show with big news? It is coming from the Vatican. So Pope Francis has now apologized for the role that the Roman Catholic Church played in Canada's residential school system. The Pope also vowed to come to Canada amid calls that he apologize here on Canadian soil, something that a lot of people have been waiting to hear for a very long time. This is all sort of fresh and breaking, something that a lot of people were hoping was going to be the outcome of this these week-long visits to the Vatican. So what's our reaction to this?
I mean, I have so many thoughts and feelings about this, and yeah, good. It's one small drop towards something. But I don't want to make more of this than it should be made of. You know, I can't help but think that we've spent a week talking about a slap where there's been so much collective outrage. And I simply don't think there's been enough collective outrage when it comes to the legacy of the Catholic Church and the damage that they have done on so many levels. And I can't help but also think that if there were any other business in the world that had the kind of legacy that this corporation in many ways does. You think about the legacy of sex abuse scandals within the church and the kind of moving around of parish priests. And you think, of course, about the legacy of residential schools and the sexual abuse, the physical abuse, the fact that we're continuing to discover all of these unmarked graves. I mean, the amount of damage and that has been overlooked and buried, quite literally, to me, and I'm sorry, isn't really that something to really celebrate. Yes, it's a right move, but here's the thing. This is an institution that is worth, by many estimations, billions of dollars. And so I think the first step, what we want to see is money. And I don't even trust the Catholic Church to do that well. Because a couple of years ago, CBC reported on the fact that they spent millions of dollars. The millions of dollars that were supposed to go to residential school survivors ended up in the hands of lawyers, administrators, private fundraising companies, and loans, and so on. None of the other residential school churches that were involved in residential schools have the same story. They all did put money towards the reparations that were asked of them, but the Catholic Church did something different. So I'm just going to wait and see what happens next.
Yeah, I think for me, I hear you. I think there's a lot that still needs to be done. For me, I wonder if you think of this way, because I know that you have Catholic teaching history, and so do you. And actually, I do too. I just don't talk about it much. But it's amazing how these things come back to you at certain times. So I thought a lot about grace. And grace is big in the Catholic Church, right? Grace is the gift that comes from God that helps you repent and also forgive. And we saw the purest example of grace, not from the Catholic Church in these last few days, but from the Indigenous delegates.
I thought the exact same thing, offering gifts.
Yes. And the ceremonies and the performance. They gave us such a beautiful example of grace, basically the embodiment of the divine. And they did it at a place that aimed to destroy them, that caused generations of pain and trauma. This institution that claims to be the arbiter of morality and righteousness, that claims to know the direct path to salvation and God and the eternal. And they did it in that place, in an institution that continues to dictate still who belongs and who doesn't, who's worthy and who isn't. This Indigenous delegation went to the house of God, to the Pope's house, and served up a huge heaping of grace. And there are billions of people throughout history who follow this religion. And it made me wonder, what is the religion we should be following, if not the community and the culture that gave us the best of humanity over the last few days? It's a humbling for the Catholic Church. To me, I saw what happened over the last few days as a gigantic serving of humble pie for the Pope and for the Catholic Church. And I wonder if Catholics out there are asking themselves, who is the embodiment of grace?
Yeah, it's a great point. I will say, as a born and raised Catholic, you know, while I don't actively practice today, I think I'm left and have been grappling, I think a lot of us have been, about what is the role of the church today and really looking at our history and all of our teachings. But I will say this, it's a very obvious thing to me, but I don't know that people have been talking about it a lot, was when Ryan and I visited the Vatican many years ago, and you take all the tours, the one thing that strikes you perhaps more than anything is how opulent, particularly St. Peter's Basilica is. You actually walk in, and it was built to make you feel the reverence to God. This is God incarnate. It's bigger than you. God's all power and almighty, and it's literally built into the columns so that you feel really, really small. And what is it? It's wealth. And how did the Catholic Church amass the amount of wealth that it has today to the tune of billions of dollars, but a history of pillaging and taking and subjugating communities like the Indigenous communities here on Turtle Island. Literally, the columns that hold up St. Peter's Basilica was taken from the backs of communities like our Indigenous peoples. And I sit there and I said to Ryan, when I look around at this wealth, you could sell one painting, one piece of art by Michelangelo, garner hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, and pay off reparations for an entire country. One piece of art. That's just my very quick, unofficial math. I don't understand, and this is my grappling as a Catholic, why the Vatican is rich. Why is it a profitable business? Why is the Pope sitting, and I don't want to put the blame on just specifically this Pope, but the institution has built a hierarchy where there is a man at the top and there is all this wealth underneath. I personally think that a radical act would be for the Catholic Church to literally bankrupt itself by selling off everything it owns to give back to the generations of this world everything it has taken to make it as rich as it is today.
What are the chances?
There are no chances of that. And that's very controversial what I say, because my family is very, very, very devout. And there is a lot of good that the Catholic Church has done. I'm not saying that it hasn't. But when you look at history, what outweighs what today? It's what I grapple with as a Catholic.
And I think you speak for many people who are grappling with that kind of duality and that sort of reality. How can I continue to practice something that so clearly is setting up just absolute atrocities? I do think, though, when I look at this past week, the Catholic Church does not often offer that clear of an apology. Is it what it needs to be? No. Are we hoping they come to Canada? And did the Indigenous people show such grace in going there? Yes. But I do think that I take the cue from the leaders who were there, and there is a hopefulness to that.
Yeah.
There is, and perhaps that's the ultimate showing of grace, like you said, Lainey. But there is something to be said about this apology, and I would like to believe that though it is not ever going to be enough, no amount of money, no trip to Canada, that this is at least a rarity for the Catholic Church. And those type of rarities are what we are going to need to make a new path moving forward.
You know what would be great, too, though, is because there are so many amazing Catholics. My mother is one of them. I think for the parishioners who are listening to this and seeing this, that they also hold their priests to account. That I think it's not just going to be about money and reparations within the Indigenous community. It's also about Catholics understanding on a deeper level what they can do. And that it can't just be some... I think that ongoing dialogue with the priest...
We've talked about this, I think, on this show, about how many people are leaving religion, organized religion, and especially, let's say, Catholicism. And that we had this debate, I think, and it was, do you leave the church in protest and nothing gets changed and nobody gets held to account? Or do you stay in the church? And for example, Mom, I'm talking to you. When you're at church on Sunday, do you stand up and say, I think all of today's donations go to Indigenous communities and not back to my church today? I mean, I'm waiting for all the Catholics to rise up.
Or they just start a new one. Like, there's a new one, a nonprofit
one. I mean, we're talking about centuries.
Centuries
to reverse.
I'm saying that's the religion. What's the religion to follow that can show you the way?
Yeah.
Buddhism.
I was just going to say Buddhism. Buddhism.
Maybe so. Maybe so.